When I was younger, my dad told me never to lie. In our house, if you did something wrong, my dad would say, you can get in trouble once if you tell me the truth, or twice if you lie about it. I think that was something that he picked up from his German parents, the German parents who survived the Holocaust. His mother survived Dachau, and his father escaped Germany right before the war, but worked for the US Army as a Wunderkind. And when I realized I was gay around 10 or 11, I worried about what views, opinions, or life lessons my dad had inherited from his father. The father that was strict, often emotionally distant, and very outspoken about his political views. Grandpa was what I would describe as a conservative libertarian, and he wouldn't spare feelings when discussing. In fact, one memory I have of him is him, my grandma, my dad, and my brother eating dinner together before a play in Chicago. I must have been about 12 years old. I'm unsure how the conversation started, but I know it ended with my grandpa saying to my dad, well, gays are of a different race. My dad replied, Dad, they're not a different race. To which my grandpa said, you know exactly what I mean. My dad dropped the conversation. Now, over the course of the next few years, my parents went through a terrible, nasty divorce, and I was split half the week with my mom and half the week with my dad. And as I started to really realize what it meant to be gay and that I would have to tell my family, I kept thinking about the conversation we had with my grandpa. So I tried to hide that reality and date guys. I tried for about 1.5 years, but it was no use. I knew when David Weiner kissed me with tongue in a Sears at Southridge Mall in Milwaukee on our third date that boys were not for me. I had my first secret girlfriend in my freshman year of high school, and I knew I couldn't put off coming out much longer, and I was terrified of the ramifications. My fears were realized when my twin was accidentally outed as bi to both our parents earlier in the year. Then my dad privately told me that he didn't believe in bisexuality and that Mal, my twin, would come around. So based on his reaction to Mal's coming out, I knew I had to be much more intentional and sure when coming out to him. So I had this plan in theory to set my parents down separately because they were divorced by then. But that was theory. In practice, it was much more of a stumbling out of the closet. My coming out journey to my mom is one for a different day, but know that I came out in freshman year of high school to her, but I wasn't out yet to my dad. So I straddled the line of being in and out of the closet for about 5 months. By then I was a sophomore in high school dating my third girlfriend. I know, I got around. I was in health class packing up my backpack when my teacher approached me. She let me know that she was teaching a class on human sexuality at a local college and was looking to do a panel on high school students who were out. Because I was fairly visible at school as the president of the Gay Straight Alliance, I said yes. You know, the Gay Straight Alliance, which I told my parents was pottery club so I could hide the fact that I was gay. In order to go, though, I had to get my parents to sign off since it was outside of school hours. Much to my surprise, my mom signed off without much of a fight or questions. However, because it was happening on a night that I stayed with my dad, I had to make up a lie as to the nature of the event so I could delay coming out to him. So I told probably the worst convoluted lie that the panel was on student athletes and the pressure to resist steroids. It was a terrible lie, not only because I would never take steroids for a variety of factors, but also because I was an average sports player at best in high school. Needless to say, I could tell my dad was skeptical, but he let me go that night. When I returned home from the panel around 9, he greeted me plainly and shooed me off to bed. But I could tell his skepticism remained, and he kept asking me questions about it for days. Finally, he called the school and demanded to know what the panel was about. My health teacher knew that she had to let me know that she had to disclose to him what the actual nature was. And I broke down crying in her empty classroom, knowing this means I would be outed to him. I was so distraught. I was pulled into the school therapist's room. She asked me what I was most afraid of in coming out to my dad, and I lied again, saying that I'll be pulled off the softball team. I really doubled down on lying about sports. But the truth was that I was terrified my dad would give up joint custody of me, leaving me to stay full-time with my disabled and sometimes abusive mother, whose bipolar outbursts have left me locking myself in my room and threatening to call the police unless she left the house.
Oh my goodness.
After talking to the therapist for a bit more, I went back to my health teacher's room. I waited for her to call him, and it felt like they talked for an eternity. When my health teacher hung up the phone, she told me he seemed to acknowledge it generally neutrally. I was surprised, but knew I had to wait until I went home to talk to him. When I got home, my dad was already there, which was quite rare. When I saw him, I started crying in anticipation of what he would say. He asked me to sit in the living room. After an eternity, he told me that he was extremely mad that I lied to him about the event I went to, but understood why I couldn't come out to him. He told me that he would always love me, support me, and want to make sure that I was happy. I was. That was 2008. Now, 11 years later, my dad has met several of my ex-girlfriends. In fact, he's been incredibly receptive. He even suggested I bring one of my girlfriends to my older brother's wedding as my date. But some of my girlfriends haven't received his approval. But it's not because I'm gay. It's in retrospect, some of them were awful. I mean, they didn't really meet our standards. He used to sometimes ask me if I would ever be with a guy, and I said no. I don't lie. He taught me that.